to another edition of Capital Week with David Owen. I'm Dirk Lammers of Setter Services, and joining us as always is David Owen, the president of the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And boy, David, you look like you're up there in the cheap seats this week, the Bob Euchre seats of the House, if you will.
This is the gallery view of the House of Representatives. Week one, if anyone can remember clear back to there, we had a floor view of the House of Representatives taken from that area, which is a walled off area where the reporters sit and have access to the debates. Used to be called the press box. Of course, now we have all kinds of media that sit there. So people can kind of see the gallery that goes all the way around the house. We have those nice arches, and they're nice until you sit behind them, because about a third of the seats up here, you're behind one of those arches and you can't see a damn thing. But the house is an elegant place. You can see in the front the dais, two podiums. When the governor delivers the State of the State address or budget address, she enters from this side, goes to the top podium to address a joint session, and you'll see seats in these aisles where the Senate comes over and the 35 senators join in. So we're trying to vary the looks of the Capitol, and so here is the similar look we had last week in the Senate, in the House, and I'm not sure Bob Euchre would like this view, so we'll move on.
Well, sounds good. One of the bills we talked about in last week's episode was House Bill 1046, the pandemic liability limits. Now there were a couple amendments in place that passed committee, and it did get to the floor on that one, correct?
Yes, earlier this week it had a floor vote and passed with 60 votes for and 10 votes against. Some of the votes against it continue to be an expression of concern for employees at larger businesses. A couple of the attorneys on the floor of the House also objected, thought the protections for healthcare and other businesses were a little broad. As I noted, we have inserted the language gross negligence in place of some other verbiage. So this is now going over and will be heard on Thursday of this week in front of Senate in the Judiciary Committee.
Well, thanks. We'll go through a few bills here real quickly that you're just kind of updating on. What about HB 1053? We talked about that last week, fees for electric cars. What's happening with that?
This came out of committee unanimously, but the fee was reduced from $100 down to $50 just to get something passed. We have fewer than 200 electric cars. Here's the issue, and we discussed this last week, but those cars tear up the roads like everything else. But they don't buy any gasoline or fuel or propane that we tax and put that money into the road highway fund. And so somehow, as we move towards electric cars, we have to find a fee structure that's kind of a user fee, so that as they drive miles, they help pay for the roads that they're using. So we're hoping, scrawny as this fee is, that it will move through.
Senate Bill 71 would make Juneteenth a working holiday. There's another bill also that's being circulated. Tell us about the difference of these two and what's going on there.
This bill is the one that is a working holiday. There are about 11 holidays the state recognizes, and a good portion of those, it's not a paid day off, and so this would be a working holiday. The other bill would create it as a paid holiday for state employees. The board I work for, the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is more and more viewing the workforce in an inclusive fashion. So my board said, let's support this. This is important to the African American or Black community. There's only about 1.6% of them. But as we start celebrating and being aware of how diverse our culture is, Cinco de Mayo, Kwanzaa, these things are important for our understanding and for variety. So we're supporting this, and it will head to the floor.
Moving on to Senate Bill 34, it would appropriate some money to expand rural access to broadband services and uses that phrase we love, declare an emergency. Everyone's not freaking out here. Tell us about that phrase and what that means in Peer.
Yeah, I also admire you describing it as spending some money. It's $100 million. So even in peer, that's significant. Let me talk first about what this is, and then I'll talk about the emergency clause. This is the governor's commitment made during the budget address, repeated during the State of the State address. She's taken $100 million of that federal money and trying to make sure all South Dakotans have access to broadband. In spite of some of us that were hoping computers might be a fad, they apparently are important these days, and having access to the internet, being able to do business is important for farmers putting fertilizer in fields, for people doing business. We have 135,000 people in South Dakota with no broadband access. The total cost estimated at $200 million. Where's the other half come from? We've made some investment the previous years in this and have always been able to leverage some private sector money. She's hoping and believes that will happen. Now, let's talk about the emergency clause. You don't have to get in your cars and kind of head for the border. We have a mechanism at the legislature that allows bills to become law when they're signed by the governor. Most bills up here become effective July 1st, unless it's stated otherwise. We have the ability on certain kinds of legislation to put on an emergency clause. That does two things. As I mentioned, it becomes law immediately upon being signed. But the trade-off is it requires a two-thirds vote for each of the House and the Senate. So it's 47 votes in the House and 24 votes in the Senate. So it's a higher threshold, but you get to work on it immediately. It's important for this one because you want to start spending the money to get that broadband access.
Great. Let's move on to HB 1097. This would provide for philosophical exceptions to required vaccinations. This is being sponsored by Representative Pischke. Where does this stand and how is it looking?
The bill only has two sponsors. We are critical of this bill. This is an echo of last year's fight over immunizations. It is a smaller scale response to this. Last year, we had a huge debate about whether the state should be able to compel people to take immunizations, and the proponents tried to say it wasn't aimed at schools. This is more focused, but it does something that's really important, and we disagree with. In statute, parents can send their children to school without being immunized if they can document they're part of a religious whose tenets don't allow immunization. So it has to be a structured faith, a structured church, and has to have a doctrine that you can demonstrate. So that narrows the number of people that would use this exception considerably. What Representative Pischke wants to do is allow people to just declare they are objecting on their own philosophical objections. That opens the field to people that are anti-vaxxers. That will significantly increase the number of children in schools without vaccinations. We think that's a threat to public safety and will oppose the bill.
When the voters went to the polls and passed Amendment A and the initiated measure on medical marijuana and marijuana, we knew there'd be some legislation coming. HB 1095 is out there. There's a couple other bills looking to get into this field as well, right?
Right. The people's embrace of legalized marijuana has caused more excitement, disruption, chaos, concern, people trying to get into it so they can sell right away, people trying to figure out how to vote it out. You'd think somebody unleashed a box of mice in the rotunda. So it's been kind of fun. So Here's one of the reactions that happens. The Speaker of the House, Speaker Gosh, has put three placeholders, or we call them title bills. You go read this bill, it says deal with marijuana. They are bills that will go through the process. They'll be voted on by the House. By the second week in February, all the House bills have to be over in the Senate. So we very commonly use placeholder bills that have no substance to get to the end of February, early March before we know what we want to put in those bills. So watch for these three bills. They're House Bill 1095, House Bill 1100, House Bill 1101. They're easy to read. They're one sentence long, but they will stay vacant until we decide among the issues what we need to deal with. How many dispensaries, what towns are authorized to do. Marijuana is not legal till July 1st, even though it was voted last November. My guess is we won't finish all of the rules until next session. So this is the start of the mechanics of having legal marijuana in South Dakota.
Senate Bill 123 would require a comment period for initiated measures, such as the one passed, and it would require the Attorney General's statement regarding these to be included. Is that correct?
That's correct, and we know about this bill because we wrote it. This is a chamber-sponsored bill. When the initiative process starts, by the way, if you're thinking this is going to be really interesting, you may overestimate the issue, but I assume somebody will be interested. Here's the initiative process. You take your language and go to the Secretary of State. Then it goes to the Legislative Research Council. They give you all kinds of advice on structure, form, and how to do that. You have an opportunity to finish your language. Most people ignore what the Legislative Research Council said, but we do that. When you give your language officially to the Secretary of State, it goes over to the Attorney General's office, who has 60 days to write the official explanation. That's important for two reasons. It's on every sheet that gets signed, so you can read the official explanation, limited to 200 words. And more importantly, it appears on the ballot. So my guess is a significant number of people don't know about ballot measures until they get into the booth and they're looking and going, what the heck? What we want to create is a 10-day comment period within that 60 days. So the party that's trying to promote the measure, people that know they want to oppose it, or people that are interested in the process can make suggestions to the Attorney General's office. I told the staff at the Attorney General's office that we don't want to make it overly complicated. They don't have to respond to every comment. We just want to throw rocks at them for about 10 days and see if it affects their final version. Once they've declared the version final, we go on, gather signatures, vote, and do all of that. But we think that it's a legally good thing to do to let us comment on it.
HB 1076, this is the bill that would require that birth certificates reflect by the biological sex of the child. Tell us what happened last week with this.
House Bill 1076 is what we technically refer to as a mess. This gets back into some of the issues we've had dealing with transgender, dealing with bathroom use, and those kinds of things. We suspect, but we're not completely sure. Technically, this bill says that the sex on a birth certificate must be based on observing the child, but more importantly, says it can't be changed. I want to be very clear. I'll talk about how this might impact people in South Dakota. The Board of Directors of the South Dakota Chamber approaches these issues with an eye on whether they will have economic consequences, whether they will cause conventions to cancel, whether they will cause larger corporations that have an inclusive approach to their workforce to not want to be in South Dakota, cancel NCAA tournaments. So we're looking for bills that blindly discriminate against classes of people that are being more and more included in the workforce and by society. The proponents of this bill suggest that they're trying to maintain the sanctity of public records. And so if you allow somebody to change their birth certificate because they later in life identify with a different gender than was on their birth certificate, if you legally allow them to do that, you make more uncertain your public records. The fear is, and the counter argument is, that that's just another way to discriminate against people with transgender and deny them an opportunity to have a legal document that fits their identity. I will tell you this, as we look to see if the economic consequences are confirmable, and that's a question we will answer in the next day or two. I can answer whether or not statistically public records are threatened. We have 9,000, 10,000 live births and about an equal number of deaths in South Dakota. We've had about 14 requests to change gender identity on birth certificates over a period of years. That's statistically insignificant. Some courts have allowed it, others have not. I think the claim that this is designed to protect public records is a little thin. Whether or not it is a threat to economics, we want to determine first. And if it is, we will join the opposition. But it's going to be talked about this week because of how it passed the House.
And tell us a little bit about that. So when a committee kills a bill and it gets returned to life, resurrected, that's called a smoke out. Tell us about that process, because I know a lot of people that don't follow the legislature wondered, oh, I thought it was dead.
The most important thing I should point out is that smoke out has nothing to do with marijuana. We were smoking out bills long before we legalized pot. It could be a smoke-filled room years ago, but we don't do that either anymore. Legislature has some safety nets. Committees can kill bills and do every day. About half the bills that get introduced to the legislative session actually pass. The backup mechanism to keep let's imagine that a committee made a mistake. That happens about once in a while. So there's a mechanism by which a representative or senator can stand up and say, I want that bill delivered to the floor, even if the committee doesn't want to do that. And it takes, I think we decided 1/5. The question will be by who is ever presiding the motion to smoke out or to have the committee deliver the bill. Are they supported? And literally the ones that want to support it stand up and we count. And if there's enough, the committee is ordered to produce the bill. They sometimes will, in short order, go stand outside the chamber and meet officially and deliver the bill without recommendation. The next step is to vote the next day, to vote on whether or not to calendar the bill. And this is a vote taken by the entire body. And it basically says, look, this committee's been ordered to deliver the bill. Do you want to put it on the calendar? Do you want to debate it? And when it comes to 1076, on a vote of 40 yes, and it's a simple majority vote, so they only need 36, 40 yes to 30 no, the House decided, yes, we will calendar that bill, and they calendared it for the same day. So it was taken up at the end of business that same day, debated, and ultimately passed 39 to 31. So it's now going over to Senate, where I believe it's been assigned to Senate Health Committee.
Anything else from the legislature before we talk a little bit about business day at the legislature?
You know, we've talked about the chamber, the purpose of these podcasts, but what I've done a lousy job of is explaining you. I've chosen Dirk and etc. Company to be a partner. They're doing the production. They're making this look as professional as it does, because Lord knows me standing in front of camera doesn't do that. Dirk, thank you for signing up. We've used Dirk's services in campaigns and other times, and I can tell you, every time we've used them for social media, I hear feedback from all over the place that says, geez, you're everywhere. Dirk, take just a quick second and explain yourself and your company.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate that. Yes, we are Cetera Services, myself and my wife and business partner, Angela Lammers. And we do everything from social media, production such as this, association management, public relations, and just about everything to help associations. That's what we're clear with. Any kind of trade associations, chambers. We like working with these types of groups and supplementing their services or coming in alongside them as an executive director.
You're based in Sioux Falls, right?
Yes, we are. I
And you,
should have put the Falls Park background, I guess, up instead of this one.
yeah, but you're virtual, so you can help groups all over the state and country.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the beauties of this, doing these types of video productions.
Let me do something really sneaky. You're also an author and have a book about baseball no hitters.
Yes, perhaps that's why I made the Bob Uecker reference at the beginning. I did interview Bob Uecker for that book on no hitters because he was the victim of a no hitter as a batter. So we got to joke about that in Milwaukee a little bit.
I'm going to ask you about that in future podcasts. Thank you so much for doing this. I'll turn it over to you to sign off.
Thanks. Before I sign off, give me a quick hit on Business Day at the Legislature, February 17th. It's an online event. So basically, it's an offer you can't refuse.
Absolutely. We're going to be the most important thing that we do in Business Day is our business caucus. It's usually the people in the room. We do a legislative briefing. We explain all these wonderful issues, but we offer food, so you're inclined to stay. But we use cell phones to vote immediately, and we get the results of the Business People's Caucus and share those with legislators. This year, we're using a format that will allow hundreds of people to sign in, participate, and vote. Then, after we do the caucus, we have invited the governor to address the group. We've invited the U.S. Chamber to give us a briefing about things going on in Washington. And we also have somebody from the Federal Reserve Office in Minneapolis to explain their most recent survey and their view of the economy.
Terrific. We'll put in the comments, we'll put the link if you want to register. It's just $50, a bargain for such great speakers. And we hope to see you there. David, thanks for this week. And I guess we'll be back next Monday and do it all over again.
Thank you, Dirk. Look forward to that.